I am Shavana Wynn, and I am a learning specialist here at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, Phoenix. I work with our Pathway Scholars Program and then also with traditional medical students, assisting them with study strategies and preparing for their medical exams and also their board exams when it comes time for that in the curriculum. So thank you for joining us tonight. So I hope I'm going to say some things today that will help you as you go through and prepare for the MCAT. Okay, so I'm going to start it off with a poll tonight. And the first poll is going to be, how many of you have ever previously taken the new MCAT? So go ahead and vote so I can get a feel for. Okay, perfect. So I've got looks like many people who have not sat for the new MCAT. Okay, so that's good to know. That will help, and I will let you know when I'm addressing something that sometimes I hear from people who have never sat for the exam before and tried to cater to that, and then also got a couple people who have already taken it, and then I will also address some of that as well. Okay, all right, so let's get started. So first, I'll go into the exam overview. So since there are a few people who have never taken the MCAT before, this shows you what content is on the new MCAT. So you can see, even though it doesn't have the exact topics listed, you can see where they're pulling the information from, right? So Gen Chem, OChem, Physics, Biochem. They recently added Psych and Soc, and I'll talk a little bit about those later. So you can see in the colored blocks all of the overarching topics. Then if you look to the left where I have in a red box, explore what's on the MCAT exam. So if you go on the AAMC website and you click on that link, that actually is an interactive tool where you can drill down and see specific topic areas that are going to be covered. And I'll address that when we talk about coursework too, but just so you're familiar that you do have access to know every single topic that they could pull a question from. And then lastly, if you look at the bottom of your screen, that next red box is the MCAT Essentials Guide. And that MCAT Essentials Guide tells you everything you need to know about the test itself, test date, your score, what happens if you decide to void your score. Everything that you need to know is listed in that MCAT Essentials Guide. So it is about 40 pages long, but especially if you've never sat for this exam before, I would highly recommend that you read that in its entirety so that you have a really good understanding about the journey that you're going to embark on with taking the MCAT. Okay. So this also tells you a little bit about MCAT content integration. So with the new MCAT, the AAMC paid a lot more attention to integrating the information together. So what does that mean? So I put a graphic on here to show you exactly what that means. And that means that it's all linked. So you can see where it says chemical and physical foundations of biological systems. They're pulling from all of those different areas. So if you are solely focused on studying biochem and then you don't put a lot of energy and effort into physics, that can hurt you for that entire section because of the integration that they're trying to do. So that won't always be integrated together. You'll mostly see things like biochem and biology integrated together and gen chem and ochem, kind of integrated together, but it's all fair game for them to ask you about multiple topics in the same question. So you're only going to be as strong as your weakest link for this type of an exam, and so that's really, really important to pay attention to, especially when you're trying to figure out what are your areas of strength and what are your areas of weakness, so that you can work on those as well. And then you can see I also put the number of questions and then how much time you get for each of the sections, right? So this shows you the breakdown of the exam. So this is approximately 7.5 hours long, but that's your seated time, right? So the time that you're going to be answering questions is about 6 hours and 15 minutes. And then when you add in the breaks that you get, You are looking at about 7.5 hours. So we'll talk about stamina in a little bit as well, but just so that you have a good idea, you are essentially talking about, sitting down and taking an exam for 7 hours. And, I'm sure in your undergrad experience, you haven't had to do that. And so this will be your first experience with an exam that long. And this is to mirror board exams, right? So the MCAT is now 7 hours. When you take your first board exam in medical school, that's 8 hours. Your second board exam is 9 hours. So it is making sure that you have the endurance to get through a difficult exam like this. And so we will talk about building your stamina in that way and what you can do to improve it long before you get to your test date. Okay. So this shows a little bit about the MCAT scoring. One of the things that I can't directly comment on is what do you need to get in. Every medical school is going to be different, and it really depends on if that medical school has set their minimums. I know for the College of Medicine Phoenix, we're still in talks, and a lot of medical schools, because the MCAT is so new, it is still in flux a little bit on that. So you'll have to go to each individual website and see what their requirements are. But this basically shows you how they came up with this 3-digit score. And with 500 being the median, and then the scores range from 472 to 528. So there's more information about this on the AAMC website, so I'd be real familiar with the scoring so you understand how this plays a role in that 3-digit number you'll get when you receive your score. Okay, so let's talk about getting started. And okay, so this is what I was referring to talking about coursework. So you can see up here, this is from the AAMC website where it talks about what coursework you would need to either have under your belt or you're working on in order to do well on the MCAT, right? So about 2 semesters of biology, 2 semesters of Gen Chem, 2 semesters of OChem, and so on and so forth. The one thing that they don't directly have listed, but students have found that this is very helpful because of the new biology sections that they put on the new MCAT, is to have some anatomy and physiology under your belt, because it can significantly help when you get to that organ system area. Students will ask me, do I have to have all these classes before sitting? Not necessarily, but you are going to have to go through the motions of teaching yourself the information if you have not had it already. So be real cautious of that. Another question I get a lot is, will this certain class help me with the MCAT? And you'd have to get a copy of the syllabus, which I highly recommend if you're curious if a class would help you or not. You need to get a copy of the syllabus, and you can match it up with what's on the MCAT. So remember I told you about that interactive tool that the AAMC has on their website? You can actually take the syllabus and then pull up that section on that interactive tool and see how well it matches before you sign up for a class that you think might help you, but it might not. And that's a real popular question I get for psychology and sociology. But because all of those classes are going to be so different, it's hard to tell if that exact sociology class is going to go over all of those different portions of the MCAT. But if you go on the interactive tool website, you can actually see what's on it, and then that will give you a better determination about signing up for that course. So to your right of your screen, if you're looking in that white box, that's a screenshot of what you'll see using that interactive tool. So it gets extremely granular to be able to know if that is a particular class that would help you. Another tip I'll give you as far as studying, if you're still in coursework, is you need to be working on studying for the MCAT while you're in these classes. So when you're in Organic Chemistry 1, you should be completing organic chemistry questions through whatever practice material you plan to use. You should not think of it as in isolation. You should be doing it in addition to. So you have an exam coming up. Let's say you're in biochemistry, it's over biosignaling. You're finding that section through your MCAT materials, and you're answering those biosignaling questions. So that, number one, gives you really good practice before you take your class exam. And number two, it's solidifying the content in your mind for the MCAT. So try not to get so far removed from your coursework in the MCAT. The MCAT is the cumulative exam of your coursework, okay? That also, too, will give you a really good idea. Let's say you didn't cover something in biochem and you see it's on that interactive tool. You can make a note, okay, I need to study this, rather than finding that out later. You'll know it while you're still in that class, and you can keep a journal of all of the things that might have been missed or not covered as well, and you can make sure that you cover that on your own. Okay. I highly, highly encourage all of you, before you get started, so since I have so many people who have never taken the exam before, I highly recommend that you take a diagnostic exam. So the AAMC does not have an official diagnostic exam, but I recommend to take the exam that is approximately 120 questions long, and it costs about $10. Now, if you buy the bundle, which I'll show you those bundles in a moment, you're going to get this exam in there. But if you want to wait on buying the bundle and you're like, you know what, I just want to see what I would score, I highly recommend to spend the $10 and get this 120 questions. It's going to be 30 questions per section, so it does mimic the exact exam, but it's half. So do not start this diagnostic exam at 7 p.m. and then decide around 9 you're going to start watching TV and then you're going to finish it. If you're going to do a diagnostic exam, you need to simulate testing conditions. So that means you're in a quiet space, you don't have music on. It needs to be the exact conditions you would be taking the exam under, so you can really see how you're going to do. This is not going to be timed for you through the AAMC, so you need to time yourself. So this means, cell phones off besides just your timer. I would give yourself about 3 hours maximum. So 45 to 47 minutes per section, so you can also see for the long passages if you're running out of time. So that's important to know well in advance, that you're kind of struggling getting through the passages, and you might need to work on that. So if you go on the website, you'll see this listed on the AAMC. One thing I sometimes hear students say, especially if you've never taken the exam before, is, well, I'm just going to sit for the MCAT, the actual exam, because I want to see how it is. And that's a bad idea. So once you take it, that score sticks. So if you want to see how it is, you want to see what types of questions you're going to be asked, you just need to take the diagnostic exam. Do not experiment with the actual exam and spend the $300 because you want to see how it is. Take the diagnostic exam, look at all your areas that are strong, look at all your areas that are weak, and then make your plan based on that. Okay, so that's important to remember. They do have a way so you can see where you're at, and that's important. We'll talk about timing, like when you should do that in a minute. Okay, oh, here it is, time management. So as far as time management, and I do have some suggestions up here on the screen for you, but I want to definitely say one thing, and that is that time does not equal success. So you have to be very careful when you're preparing an exam like this, that it's going to feel like you're sitting down for a lot of hours. And for those of you who have ever taken an exam and you're like, man, I sat down for all that time and I got my score back, and this score is not reflective of how much time I spent, right? Because since time doesn't equal success, you have to make sure that what you're doing with your time is effective. Because it's very easily, you can sit down for 4 or 5 months to study for this exam, and you could be spinning your wheels if you're not taking a look at how you're spending your time. So it's very important to remember, it doesn't matter how much time you're spending. It is going to be a significant amount, certainly, but you also want to make sure that you're being effective. So I put 3 options up here. These are definitely flexible. This is not, a recipe. This is something that you can take and tailor for your own success. You can see up there, depending on how much time you have. And then for this, we're going to put up another poll, because I do want to see, for those of you who are planning on taking the MCAT soon, I'd like to see when you plan to take the exam. So we'll put the poll up right here. I'm just curious, and what month are you thinking? Even if you don't have a test date set, I'm just curious what month. That might be. Okay, so I got a couple Januaries, a couple Mays, and July. Okay, yeah, that's great to know. So for the people who said January, so it's great because it's November 1st, right? And I do believe those test dates are towards the end of January, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got all of November, you have all of December, and you have the end of January. So for you, I would absolutely recommend, if you have not already taken a diagnostic exam, you need to do that this weekend so that you can be within that 3 to 6 month plan that I have up there, and you know right away what areas that you need to work on. If you're still in coursework right now, immediately you need to begin to incorporate the MCAT questions for the classes that you're in, and then also make a plan to go back and rewind on some of those topics of the coursework that you've already had. So this is just roughly, 2 to 3 hours a day during the week, and that could be, whether you're going to do Monday through Friday, Tuesday, well, I wouldn't say Tuesday, Thursday at this point, maybe Monday through Friday or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, at least building in, if you're taking in January, at least building in about 3 days during the weekdays, and then certainly one full length a day if you can at all possible on the weekend. So that full length day will certainly help build your stamina that you're going to be studying for that long and sitting down concentrating for that long, because that's what you'll have to do on the actual exam. But building in that time is extremely important. So what I say to students, because you all are probably very busy, is you need to carve out time that nothing else will come up. So for instance, I worked with a student a few months ago, and a lot of her classes started at 10 a.m. So she's like, okay, from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'm going to just focus on MCAT study. So that means no other homework, no research projects. You're not going to meet a friend for breakfast. That's your designated time. She's like, I'm going to get to the library at 7 a.m. That's my designated time where I'm going to sit down and rewind on MCAT topics, right? Because she was still in biochem, still in a couple other courses, and I'm like, okay, you can move forward with those, but I had already taken physics some time ago, so I'm like, during that 7 to 10 a.m. time slot, that's when you're going to be working on that physics content to make sure you have it down. So you have to carve out time. So that could be in the morning, and I do recommend, if you're a morning person, that's in the morning, because then other things won't come up. The further you get along in the day, it's hard because things start to come up. Or that could be, okay, I have class from 8 a.m. to noon. I'm going to take time to eat lunch from 12 to 1, and then from 1 to 4, I'm going to have my dedicated MCAT study time, and then from 4 to 7, I'm going to work on other homework or schoolwork or other exams I have coming up. So whatever that looks like, and that you can apply that to the medium suggestions I have up there, and if it's more intense, you can also apply that there as well. But just remember, it also depends on what you're doing. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. Okay. So as far as making a schedule, you can certainly sit down and carve out, and I'll show you, I have an example of a schedule in just a couple slides, and I'll show you what that can look like. But if you want to take the guesswork out of creating a schedule, you can certainly visit this website. It's called CramFighter, and CramFighter is an electronic calendar where you can enter in all of your resources for the MCAT, and it will electronically make you a schedule. And let's say you get sick for 3 days and you can't study. When you go in there and put in there that you were sick and you didn't get to study Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, it will auto adjust your study schedule for the remainder of your time. So you put in there what you're thinking your intended test date is, and then it will automatically adjust it for you. This is not free. And so I highly recommend that you sign up for a trial first, because you can do a trial for a week and you can play around with it and see if you like it. But it will push a schedule to your phone. So if you put in there that you want to get through, 400 Khan Academy videos, it will divide them up based on how many days that you have to study and what time period that you want to spend studying. Okay, so look into it. Like I said, it's not free. And you can certainly also do this with a good old-fashioned calendar, a paper calendar. You can use Google Calendar. But if you want something, a little bit more electronic or high-tech, it is a pretty good website that a lot of students do use to make a study schedule. Okay, so a couple things to remember as far as time management. You want to prepare early. This is not going to be an exam where you're going to do well with just getting the gist. Or, yeah, I did okay in my coursework, I'll do a little bit of prep and then I'll go in and take it. This exam is designed for you to put in a significant amount of time to study in order to see the results, because they're mirroring what you would normally do in medical school. So as early as you possibly can, you want to begin to prepare. So for those of you that are taking the exam in May, I would say, around February, it would be a good time. Or, if you take your diagnostic in January and you're like, oh, I've got a lot of work to do, you can certainly, move that up. But you certainly want to give yourself enough time where you can correct on some of those areas that might need a little bit more attention. Make a mandatory schedule. So that's what I just talked about. Like, you have to carve out time where nothing else can be going on. And let's say you come from a big family and you're always getting calls from your family like, hey, we're going bowling and we really want you to come. Have a conversation with your family and your friends and let them know, hey, I'm beginning my MCAT preparation time, and so I won't always be available. But if we carve out some time, maybe we do Sunday dinners. I can do Sunday dinners, I could do Saturday morning breakfast. I wouldn't be able to do both, or I wouldn't be able to do a lot of spontaneous activities during the week. So make sure you carve out a mandatory schedule for yourself where nothing else is coming up. Assess your current situation, school, work, personal responsibilities. It's not always possible for everyone to stop working. And so that's another reason why I said you need to make sure that when you are sitting down, that dedicated time is precious. So you need to make sure you're being very, very efficient. If you have a lot of things on your plate, you might want to assess them and see, do I need to be doing all this at this moment in time? All right, so certainly, volunteering is extremely important to get into medical school. But if you find yourself, you've got 4 volunteer experiences going on, you might need to just reevaluate it for that 3 to 6 month time period and say, what can I pick up after I've already sat for the exam? What can I put on hold? Okay. Complete question sets along with your coursework. That's very important. Do not get behind on that, especially if I see some people taking it in July and September. You could certainly, if you're still in school, for those guys, you could certainly be doing questions along with all of that coursework over the next 7 to 9 months after January, or if you wanted to, absolutely start now. But that's important, and then you can start reviewing on some of those other topics if you want to build it in a little closer to the exam. And then build in a Q bank day to increase your stamina. Okay, and I'll show you what that looks like on this slide. So structure your learning. So you can see I put in there an off day. So that would be perfect time on Sundays to tell my family, like, okay, I can do Sunday dinners on my off day. But you can see during the rest of the week. So this is an aggressive schedule, but I just wanted to show you what you could, possibly do. And this person is covering, so this week they're working on biology, biochem, and physics, and they've got it spread out over the 5 days. And you can see they were very specific on Monday how many videos they were going to get through during that 3 or 4 hour period. So don't sit down and say, all right, time to study. You need to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to cover biosignaling. I'm going to cover DNA. I'm going to cover the reproductive system. You want to make sure that you're being very, very strategic because sitting down open-ended can get very overwhelming quickly. Okay, so you can see on Saturday, so this person, they have their QBank day built in on Saturday. So that means on Saturday, they're not doing a lot of hardcore studying. So they're not necessarily watching Khan Academy videos or reading in their exam cracker book. They're doing a full day of just questions, questions, questions. I'm not a huge fan of sitting down and doing full-length practice exams, because if you sit down on a Saturday at noon and you study and you answer practice questions until 7 p.m., I guarantee you are not going to, at 7:30 p.m. say, okay, time to go back through 7 hours of questions. That's very unrealistic and very difficult to do. So chunk them up. Every hour do 30 questions and then review them, or 25 questions and review them, and make sure that you're doing that, at intervals where you can remember why you chose a particular answer. So why did I choose B and not C? Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot, that this is how DNA replicates, right? So that's how learning works. But if you forget why you chose B over C, you can't learn from that mistake. So I am a huge fan of doing tons of practice questions. I'm not a huge fan of completing tons and tons of practice exams, because I think you get so far away from the learning process by doing that, and you'd be exhausted, right? If you did that every single week from now until your test date, you'd be exhausted. I do think you want to build in, doing that for 1 or 2 times, but since you're going to be sitting down for a QBank day every single Saturday, that also simulates sitting down and building your stamina to study and stay focused for that 7 to 8 hour period. So you're going to be used to that when you go to the Prometric Center and take this, but you're also going to get a lot of learning out of chunking that up a bit. So keep that in mind. Okay. So let's talk about procrastination, or also what I like to call waiting for your energy, right? So I always tell students that if you're waiting to prep until you feel like it, that feeling is never going to come. It is not going to happen. So do not try to prep when you feel like it, because you're not going to feel like it, which is why I'm such a fan of carving out a mandatory time, like you're clocking in for work every day, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, however you want to build that in, because that feeling is just not going to come if you do struggle with procrastination or getting started. If you form a habit with this, so it takes about 66 days to form a habit. So if you do something for roughly 66 days in a row, it'll start to feel weird if you don't do it anymore. And especially if you're trying to build in some regular time, for those of you that are taking it in January, it'd be real important to start that habit right now, and then you can, that's like becomes clockwork. Create a reward system for yourself. So if you're planning on studying at night, and let's say you're a Walking Dead fan like I am, okay, Walking Dead comes on at 9, you're like, okay, I'm going to study from 5 to 9, and at 9 I'm done because I'm watching Walking Dead, and that's my reward to myself for sitting down from 5 to 9 and being extremely efficient. So you can also do that as far as hanging out with friends and family. Like I said, let's say you have a Sunday dinner to go to. So it's a really good idea to kind of box yourself into, okay, I got to be somewhere, so I have to get this done, because that can create some energy for you too, where maybe none was present before. So just little tips to help. But if you're waiting for that feeling to get started, you're just going to have to start, okay? Because you might end up running out of time if that's what you're waiting to kick in. So shorter amounts of time, burst of energy where you have something to do after, you have someone to meet after, and that can help facilitate that process. Okay, so let's talk about materials and resources and do our next poll. In this poll, I'm interested in what prep materials has everyone used? And if you guys have any questions for me, certainly write them in the Q&A box, and I will see them and try to answer them too as we're going along. Okay. Okay, so Kaplan, Princeton Review, Khan Academy, and then looks like everyone's used AAMC materials, which is good. Okay. And for those are free if you've taken it. You can also go ahead if you were planning on using any materials, you can go ahead and also take that poll as well. And that way when it comes up, I'll know. Okay, it looks like a couple of you had some plans with Princeton Review, Kaplan course. Okay, and Khan Academy? Okay, so I think, yeah, we'll talk about all of those and about integrating them as well. Okay, so first let me talk about prep courses, because this is a popular question that I get is, should I take a prep course, right? So I put up here that this is just my 2 cents on prep courses. So I like prep courses, right? I think that a prep course provides you with it does a couple different things, right? It provides you with a good overview. It can provide you with a good review of all of the topics. And they build in a lot of strategies for success on how to answer MCAT style questions, right? So I do think it's great in that regards. Some of the drawbacks are they are extremely expensive, and this is a course for the masses, right? So when you're in Princeton Review or you're in a Kaplan course, they're teaching to everyone. So if this is not something that's going to work with your learning style, so I'll tell you a story. I talked to someone probably last year, and he had signed up for a prep course and then said, well, yeah, it doesn't really help me. And when I talked to him, I'm like, well, tell me, everything that you're doing. And he's like, well, I go to the prep course and then I still don't understand it. And I just come home and then I read the book and then it clicks. So really, essentially, you could have saved your, $3,000, $2,000, and that was his strongest learning style. Was an R for the read write, and it was reading the book. So got the same information from reading the book, but he was hearing it in an auditory way in the class. So you have to be very careful that if you're going to sign up for a prep course, it meets your need as far as your learning style. The other thing is I talk to a lot of students that say, well, I went to the prep class and it didn't help me. But when I talk to them about what they actually did, you still have to go home after the prep course is completed and do a ton of work. It's not going to help if you're just sitting there absorbing the information. You still have kind of double duty when you get home to study everything that they just talked about and also to apply everything that they talked about. It doesn't work if you just sit there to absorb it. So please keep that in mind if you're going to sign up. I did put some information. So if you're a current ASU student, you get the self-paced Princeton Review for free. So please talk to your pre-health advisor about that and they can let you know what information you need to sign up for that resource because that's completely free. And also for Kaplan, Kaplan has a discount program. It's called their Starting Line program where based on your FAFSA, if you have a situation where you're economically disadvantaged, you can get 25% to 60% off one of their in-person courses. So, and I put the link there for you as well. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, that will certainly save you some money as far as prep courses go. But just keep in mind, like, you still have to make it work for you, and I'll reference that too when we bring up your VARC assessment here in a minute. Okay, let's talk about Khan Academy. So I am a big fan of Khan Academy because it's free, and Khan Academy officially partnered with the AAMC because they said, hey, you know what, not all students have $2,000 or $3,000 to sign up for a prep course, and a lot of these materials are extremely expensive. So let's work with Khan Academy. They built 1,000 videos, they built 3,000 practice questions for free, and everyone has access to them. So I recently saw a webinar on this where these videos and practice questions get visited about 55,000 times a day, right? So these are extremely popular. A lot of students are using them. And from what I've heard from a lot of my students, they are pretty good. So if you go on Khan Academy, you can make an account, which is nice because it'll track what practice questions you've done and what videos that you've watched. And you can see they have topics on everything. They even cover cars, and they have strategy videos on here for how to answer cars passages. They also cover psych and soc. So the psych and soc part is going to require definitely some understanding, some memorization, but they have pretty good videos on all of those topics for psych and social. That's a good resource to supplement those areas. Where I have that first black arrow on the left-hand side, those are the passages questions. So when you see the passage questions, those are going to be the questions where you're going to have to do some critical thinking and have your reading comprehension skills real up to par to get through those. So I recommend you completing all of those passage sections for some great practice. And where I have the arrow on the right-hand side, those are going to be all the freestanding questions. So those are the watch the videos, and very quickly, what did you learn? Did you get the information? It's a quick check of your knowledge. And on the left-hand side, the passages are going to be, can you now take that knowledge and critically think through a passage to get to the correct answer? So practicing with both of those would be a good idea. My recommendation would be to complete all 3,000 practice questions. And I've got a slide on that in a minute. But that's certainly my recommendation, is to complete all of those, okay, if you can. This is just another suggestion that I have for Khan Academy. So you can see I was answering skeletal system questions, and even though I got this question right, I still clicked on, after I answered the question, so I read it and then I chose what I thought was the right answer, and I'm like, oh great, I got it correct, but I still clicked give me a hint so I could read through the explanation and to make sure, okay, yep, that's what I was thinking. I was on the right track. That's where my mind went. And also you can get a lot of learning out of everything else that they say. So you can pick up a lot of tips from reading through every single one of these that they do. They have these for freestanding and the passage-based questions. So I highly recommend that regardless if you get it right or wrong, you click give me a hint and display all of the hints so you get a lot of learning out of that portion. Okay. All right, let's talk about exam crackers. So I also like exam crackers. If you're, look at your VARC assessment. So if you're looking at your VARC assessment and you look at the R, right? So V was for visual, A was for auditory, R was for reading, writing, and K was for kinesthetic. So if you look at your VARC and you notice that your R is the highest number that you have, that means you're going to get a lot out of having a set of books to prepare for the MCAT. So Exam Crackers has a pretty good set of books. They just came out with their 10th edition. They do have a bit of a discount on Amazon, so it's $274 for the full set of books if you buy it through the Exam Cracker website. But if you go on Amazon, there's a bit of a discount that you can get for that resource. Now you can see under here where I put that the biology, molecules, and the cars books are about $49. So if you were to purchase the question books, you're going to pay about $50 per book, which can add up pretty quickly. So these are the only two books they have out now for the new MCAT, and they are coming out with the physics one. But I would be pretty selective if you were trying to conserve just economically, that you didn't have to purchase all of these, because they do have question sets built into these books. And then at the bottom you can see they also have a review class. Also not cheap, but if you did want, something live online for Exam Crackers, you have that option to you as well. They have a study guide on their website where you can see, and then you can go on and look at the different days and what you'd have to do every day, and it follows along with the books. So if you happen to purchase the book, you get that discount as well. Okay. As far as the double AMC, so the double AMC, they don't have it on their website right now. They took it down because they're reevaluating it, but I believe this is going to go up in a couple weeks. It'll be live. And that is, you can buy all the materials bundled together. So between $230 and $250, it does get you the full bundle of all their materials, but you can certainly go through and just buy things individually. You wouldn't have to spend all that money, but that gets you the 11 online materials and 2 print materials, or you can take out the official guide and the flashcards if you wanted to. But to the right is an example of everything that you would get if you did happen to spend that much money and buy the full bundle. Okay, so that just gives you a good idea on double AMC materials. So I definitely recommend, do not go and sit for the MCAT without completing a large majority of the double AMC official materials, so the questions, because that's going to be just a great source of learning, and you can actually really see the style of questions that you're going to be getting. But it just really depends on your situation. They do have a fee assistance program, which I think is a great program, and it is, so based on your situation, if you do qualify for the fee assistance program, you would get a significant reduce in cost for the MCAT exam, and you would also receive all of the prep materials for free. So you would have that complete bundle for free. So I highly recommend that if you feel like you would qualify for this program and benefit, to register for it so that you get all of the double AMC materials and you wouldn't have to pay for them. So keep that in mind as you are considering prep. Okay. So let's talk about how to study. So this is the biggest thing that I see from students is they'll say, I studied for the exam and I didn't do well. And a lot of times I find it was either they were lacking in content knowledge or they didn't do enough practice questions, because you have to have both. If you just work on the content knowledge but you don't practice the application, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, you won't be able to answer the questions. They've designed the exam that you have to combine both. Same on the other side, if you're really good at taking tests, but you don't have the content knowledge behind you, you'd still get the question wrong. So you have to make sure that you're doing a good mix of both. My recommendation is, so for those of you that had, if you have a little bit more time, you can certainly structure your studying like this. All of the early months is 70% learning, 30% questions, right? So those early months are reading exam cracker books, watching Khan Academy videos, making notes, working with a study group, getting a tutor for the content that you don't understand, and then also making sure that you're building in those QBank days on the weekends. And then the closer you get to the exam, once you're done with all that learning, you switch to 70% questions, 30% learning. So that would be, okay, I'm doing a Khan Academy passage. Oops, I missed it. Let me refer back to my book to see what was the information that I missed there for that particular question. So, but you have to have both in order to do well on this exam. That's how it's designed. So keep that in mind, that at some point you'd want to switch over. If you have a test date in January, you might have to do a little bit more combining of this with your 3 months. Or if you've already started studying, if you have a test date in January, you might be ready to switch over to the 70% questions probably middle of December, where then you're just doing questions during that Monday through Friday time period and on Saturdays. Okay. So let's talk about learning. So we're going to have your VARC results in front of you, because I'm going to put on the screen real quickly here how to study for the MCAT based on your VARC results and based on identifying how you learn. But I want you to keep in mind this cone of learning. So this cone shows you that if you are not active learning for anything that you're doing, it's a very passive form of learning. So if I'm studying for the MCAT and I just open up my Princeton review book, that's going to get me about 10%, right? Because I'm going to retain about 10% of what I read. But if I'm reading my Princeton review book and I'm also talking to myself, that then puts me down in more of what I'm reading and saying, right? So I'm combining different forms of learning together to put me in that active learning. And then not only am I verifying what I'm reading, okay, I'm reading about biosignaling, okay, so this is what happens, this is what happens, this is what happens, and then I go up to my whiteboard and I try to teach it to myself on the whiteboard. That puts you in another realm, right? Because now you're in the 90% of what you're saying and doing. So if you really want to boost your active learning for this exam, you have to be doing stuff like that. It has to go beyond reading, or it has to go beyond just watching videos or just hearing the information. So that's what this cone of learning is showing. Identify how you learn. So that's why I had you do the VARC results, and we'll look at that in a second. It's also a really good idea to make a list of when you learn something and make sure that you can duplicate that over and over and over again for success. So for instance, if you're like, oh yeah, I did learn that when I had flashcards, how can you implement flashcards into your MCAT study? So this shows you, so if you look at your VARC results and you had your highest number was V, this shows all hints and tips for how you should incorporate this for your MCAT study. So you're a visual learner, obviously watching videos, taking notes while you're watching the videos, talking to yourself, about that as well, using a lot of colors. So really marking up your materials and putting different things in different colors, right? So subject areas in yellow, concepts in green, just making sure that it's extremely colorful so that you can remember that during the exam, creating outlines and pictures and graphs, all of that. Making sure that you have visual representation of the text is important to remember if you're a visual learner. If you're an auditory learner, okay, this is, again, watching videos, but pausing the video to take notes. So if you're an auditory learner and you're really concentrating on listening, you'd want to pause the video and not keep playing it when you stop and take notes, because once you're writing, you're probably not listening anymore. So incorporating things like that, talking out loud to yourself a lot, making sure you're teaching yourself, participating in study groups, creating stories that you can remember and telling them to yourself. Those are all great suggestions if your highest number on that VARC assessment was an A. For the R, that's read and write. So I talked a little bit about that as far as prep materials and having books. So reading textbooks and taking a lot of notes, but in your own words. Do not rewrite the textbook. It is not going to help you. You have to take in the information by reading it and then output it in your own words by writing it. Also making sure that if you're going to watch, let's say you're going to watch the Khan Academy videos, but you have your Princeton review book open to that exact chapter, and you can take notes in that book so that when you're going back and reading, you have something to refer to. Creating your own outlines and lists and giving yourself enough quiet time that you can do all this and you can read and write quietly. Okay. And last is kinesthetic. So if your highest number was K, that normally means that you learn best by creating your own materials. So you might have to do some of that. For instance, you might have a difficult time learning off other people's flashcards. So you're going to take a little bit of time and make your own flashcards. Participating in study groups, tutoring. So making sure that you're actively learning and creating your own materials in your own words. That's very important. Making sure you have enough active breaks built in where you're exercising, taking a walk. You might be fidgeting around. That's okay. But really, if you're a K, it's really about creating your own materials to study from, and that's going to look a little different for everybody. Okay. So wrapping up here and talking about learning from questions. So learning from questions is extremely important. The whole purpose of it is so that you can correct yourself when you have you have your next question that is similar to that, so you don't make the same mistake. When you're studying for the MCAT, getting questions wrong, that's okay, because you're going to have a lot of learning that comes from that experience. And when you're reading through the hints or you're reading through the explanations, you're going to make a lot of connections that you hadn't made before, and you're going to remember that on the actual exam. My recommendation is to complete at least 2,500 to 3,000 questions before you sit for the MCAT. So if your exam's in, January, you just want to do as many as you possibly can between now and the end of January. But certainly if you have one of those later dates like July or September, you want to make sure that you build in enough prep time to do that, definitely minimum. So the more you do, the better. Just remember that you want to chunk those down into small sections so that you can remember why you might have gotten something wrong. So you can see down here I put why you missed it, and try to make sure that you're tracking it. So if you keep missing questions because of content, make a note to go back and study that content. If you keep missing questions because you're running out of time, make sure that you set a timer and you're pacing yourself and that you're working on whatever the reason is of why you're missing questions. Making sure that before you go on to the next section, you're getting at least 70% correct in that section before you just plow through. So I've talked to a lot of students and they'll see that they're not doing very well in physics, but instead of doing something about it or figuring out what to do, they'll move on to the next section. And I say, okay, for that content, if you're still in school, and you have a tutoring center, why not go to the tutor and say, hey, I need some help, figuring out, sound and how all that works. And then you can take that content area home and apply it to the questions. So making sure that you've got a really good plan and you're doing something before you move on to the next section. Okay, so that is certainly my recommendation for the amount of questions that you need to be doing. Okay, so let's talk about the aftermath, okay, and how that might feel. So when you get your score back, you're either going to be feeling extremely excited or disappointed, right? Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle of, oh, I thought this was going to be a little higher, and then you'd have to, make a determination about applying after that. But you certainly want to do a self-assessment of, if something did not go the way you wanted it to, was it my application when I was in there? Did I not know how to answer the question, or did I not prep correctly? So doing an assessment of that can really help it, you to make a determination about if you're going to sit for it again and what changes you might want to make before you sit for it the next time. And those would have to be pretty drastic changes to get a drastic result. But making sure that you're being resilient. So not being defeated during this process. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And making sure that you have a growth mindset and being extremely positive of, I can do this. I can do this. I'm going to get through this. But if, being efficient and effective is going to be the best way that you can get through this, but not being defeated about the exam before you, even start. Okay, so you'll have some feelings afterwards, but, make sure that you do a quick assessment as well about everything that you did to prepare to see what maybe changes you might want to make if you did not get the result that you wanted. Okay, so that is what I have for all of you as far to how to prep and study, and I hope I've said some things that were helpful to you.